what if the thing that feels like your rock bottom is actually the beginning of your purpose? Today's guest is English Black, a seasoned medical provider turned aesthetics business owner who didn't just build a 7-figure clinic in her first year. She's built a movement centered around empowerment, healing, and redefining beauty. From navigating addiction in her family to breaking generational patterns to choosing purpose over profit. This conversation is raw, real, and full of soul. If you've ever wondered whether it's too late to start over, whether you have what it takes, or whether your past disqualifies you from making an impact, English's story is one you need to hear. The Curated Aesthetic. You've been in business for 3 years. What an incredible 3 years it's been. Talk to me just a little bit about what happened in the first year of opening this new business financially.
Yeah, it was so exciting. I have practiced dermatology and aesthetics for nearly 20 years at that point and decided to go out on my own. And about 20% of my medical dermatology practice was aesthetic. And I opened a business knowing I could break even. And turns out I broke 7 figures in my first year. So that was pretty world rocking and mind blowing.
Yeah, that's insane. So you've been in the industry for this long, but you weren't in business for yourself. What was it that caused you to decide, I want to have my own business?
A couple of things. I mean, I as a seasoned PA, I thought, medicine keeps changing and changing, and I would not necessarily say for the better, which is very frustrating for somebody who wants to be a giver. And unfortunately, the system providers are kind of stuck in the middle these days of needing to generate more income, but patients wanting more and more out of it, and the math doesn't work that way. So I thought, well. And in my area, there had been nobody solely focused on facial rejuvenation. So I was like, well, here's an opportunity. I can take as long as I want. I can have relationships that I foster and feel safe and open up my own clinic. A lot of people have been doing it for a while. And yeah, so that's how I got there.
As a physician's assistant, prior to opening your business, what were you mainly doing for work?
Yeah, medical dermatology and aesthetics. I'd been kind of like a wavelength. I did focus on medical some years, and other years it was only aesthetics, and then some years it was a combination. So yeah, over 10 years just doing aesthetics, and then the other portion a blend.
Now, you didn't go into business for yourself, though, thinking I'm going to crack 7 figures.
Heck no. No, I mean, I was like, I just knew I had to do it. I had to. And it's kind of crazy because I'm not a big risk taker. And I just knew I had to do this. And I have 3 children that I'm responsible for. And I thought, well, I hope this goes well. I'm pretty sure I can break even. And it just so far exceeded my expectations. I thought, hopefully this will work as long as I show up to work every day and give people my very best,
When you say you had to do this, what was going on in your world that made that so?
Well, just the pressure that I was describing about needing to be more productive. In medical dermatology, it's very normal to see 45 patients in a day. So you may have 5 or 10 minutes for every single patient, and that's very real. And when that's your day. And I just remember sitting down one day thinking, I mean, I am a very productive person and I love to be efficient. And I just remember thinking, I don't know if I can do this the rest of my life. I don't know if I want to do this the rest of my life. I mean, you get patients that are upset with you when you're behind, or if I'm doing a procedure like filler, then you're nervous because you have limited time, but that's something that you really need to take your time doing. So I just needed to get out there and see for myself what was possible as far as how I could deliver patient care in a safe, effective, and super high result way. And from a perspective of helping empower women and not just feeding off of insecurities or, really a cash cow is what most people would say. And I've had a hard time discussing this. For a long time, I have not wanted to discuss how great my clinic has done because it has not been about the money. That has been a happy side effect of coming in and doing what it is I wanted to do for other people, right?
Yeah, when you're motivated to create a different environment, to create a different experience for your customers, the byproduct of financial gain obviously is something that nobody is going to be disappointed by. But if you're motivated by, I want to provide a transformational experience for my
Right.
customers and clients instead of treating them like just a number. People want to feel that as a customer.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying about, like, the medical derm is that people don't wanna feel like a number, and I was very, very attuned to that, and, particularly when they're investing a lot of money into their face because they wanna feel better. They don't wanna feel rushed and discarded because you're in a hurry, and also be able to get a fantastic result. I think I would have been hard pressed to tell any administrator I've ever had that I need an hour and a half for a filler patient, which is what I do now sometimes.
How glorious is it to be able to spend that much time with your clients and to not be financially stressed, but to also not be overwhelmed by the expectations that you had as an employee in a business like this?
Oh, it's just so liberating. It's fantastic. I mean, I there's no pressure anymore. That's what I tell patients when I walk in. I'm like, "Look, we've got all the time in the world." Not maybe literally, but as far as for what we need to accomplish, there's no pressure and we're gonna be just fine. And if we're not, and if I am, not perfect, I am on occasion late for our next patient, but then I tell them, we'll do whatever we need to do to make up for it, and sometimes that's in a small gift and sometimes they don't need the time. It just depends. But I will certainly give that time back to them.
How would you describe what you actually get to do, that transformation that you provide for women without the shaming that you saw in your previous work environment?
Yeah, so I love that question because that I have recently discovered that that is really my purpose. It's what I do. And I had never thought about it this way, but I've been doing it my whole life is lifting other people, is empowering them to help them see what's possible when they are just true to themselves. How I do my patient care in this clinic is I don't always start with an assessment. That with the right person, I will do an assessment. But as I tell them, the concern is no woman needs any help feeling worse about themselves. We all feel picked apart and judged plenty. And we don't need another person doing that because you're still going to feel the way you feel about yourself when you look in the mirror, regardless of somebody else's assessment, professional or not. And so when we come from a place of starting with, well, I feel tired, I want to look more rested, I feel sad, or I feel like I look sad, we want the inside to match with the outside. And I've been doing that. And sometimes when we start to get better results, sometimes in our clinic, it is almost like a therapy session. We're talking about the inside too, because we're women, we're fostering relationships. I have learned in my life, people like opening up to me. And what a gift, what a blessing.
And did you have that when in your previous practice?
Not all the time, but the people that saw me repetitively, yes. The people that stuck with me and that got to know me. And even growing up, I have people call me from forever ago, or it's just been seems like a natural progression.
Growing up, what did you see as purpose, or what did you see in your parents that you thought was the way to live, or maybe the way not to live?
Yeah, so I would say I wasn't sure what my purpose was growing up for sure. And it's been a big, one of those maps, what they say, what we think progress looks like and what it actually looks like. Mine's definitely the chaotic little map there. But I definitely knew that I wanted more out of life than what I had seen most of the adults in my life play out. I mean, and I had a lot of angels along the way, though, that really helped guide me. But I knew I didn't want to live in poverty. I knew I didn't want to live in addiction. I knew I didn't want to live in a way that undervalued this gift of life that we have because it's such a gift, right?
So when you talk about addiction, where was that in your family childhood?
Yeah, so my father struggled with alcoholism, and then my mother has struggled with pain management. And, as it's almost if anybody's had any experience with addiction out there, it's like you have the addict, but then you have the other person in the relationship with the addict, and they almost act just like addicts because they're not trying to necessarily control an addiction to a substance, but they are trying to control another person. And so, my mother, bless her, she was consumed with trying to raise 3 children. She put herself through nursing school and did a bang up job of it. And also, being a baby boomer, neither of them were really equipped with skills to soothe that they knew of, and they did the best they could with what they had.
We all are always doing the best that we can with what we have. And I think
We are.
we have so many more tools and resources at our fingertips literally today than people had then. But what impact did living or growing up in that environment have on how you saw life then versus now?
Oh gosh. Well, I definitely grew up thinking that I needed to do it all. I needed to do it all. I was very independent. I mean, and a lot of wonderful skills were developed as a result of that, but it's all things for good or bad. The dark side of that is not asking for help, overcompensating, and doing, in a way that's unhealthy because A, it's too much of a workload, and B, you don't have a life that way. It's not real living. It was the opposite of what I was really going for. I wanted to feel like I was living a full life. But then when you fill up your schedule and every minute of your day, whether through work or kids or dogs or whatever, I'd find a way to pack my day in. And now I take time to journal on the weekends. I definitely exercise every day. And I pace myself at work. I make sure to take a lunch break, which that may sound obvious, but a lot of people in my industry don't. They don't take a break during the day. But yeah, it's a lot of self-care, and self-care in the past typically was more material, whereas these days self-care may be having more difficult conversations that I really would rather not have, or it might be, like I said, doing the journaling and the deep work of figuring out where I really am.
Yeah. So when did you see that you wanted to go down a different path? At what age did you realize I do not want to live this way?
Well, it's been an evolution, because at different points there have been different motivations. I would say the PA school portion was definitely a huge piece of that because I knew that I wanted to help, and I knew that I wanted a reliable income. I needed a way to pay off my loans that I was going to be taking on, and so that to me seemed very predictable and safe. Get it? I mean, it was safe, and it's very, but I could do what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to help people, and I knew I wanted to make the world a better place. And so the physician assistant seemed the obvious place for me, because it was hilarious. At 24, I thought, well, I'm too old to go to medical school, which, but it's fine. But I also knew that I'm type A enough that if I got used to working 120 hours a week, I might never not do that. So for me, being a PA was a lifestyle choice. But then opening a business has been the next level of living differently because I didn't want to dread going to work every day. I'd still wanted that sense of purpose and to enjoy where I was. We spend more time at work than we do with our family if you work full time, unless you found another creative way around that. So I wanted to create a space where not only patients came in to feel cared for, safe, and fantastic when they leave, but also as providers and everybody that works here to feel that way.
That's the dream, is to be able to create an environment where you provide that for your customers and your employees and yourself, right?
Yes, that's the dream. That's the dream. I think you can do anything when you really, really make up your mind to believe in yourself. And I just knew I had no other choice but to do it. And I guess those are the two examples I gave where I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew that come hell or high water, I was going to go to PA school. And I also knew I was going to open up a business. And here we are.
How many years apart, though, was that? When did you go to PA school? How old were you?
I was 24, so I graduated at the turn of the century, just kidding, at 2004. And then I opened my business in 2022.
So what transpired between 2004 and 2022?
Yeah,
A lot.
such a great question. Yeah, because when I first went into medicine, if you would have told me I'd be in aesthetics, I would have just laughed and laughed and laughed. I wanted nothing to do with aesthetics because I, like many people, thought that it was just a very superficial thing that fed off of women and other people's insecurities and profited from it. And also a lot of traditional medical people don't want to have anything to do with it because it is elective And oh, by the way, it carries risk. And why take the risk? And with time, and I'd watched my mother. She had been exploited, in my opinion, by a provider that she saw and worked with. And I wanted nothing to do with that. But as time went on and my dermatology career evolved, because injecting a little bit of Botox here and there became a requirement. And so as I dabbled in that, I had my first child, was offered a great job only injecting. And I thought, well, this is a great setup for my family. They also offer medical derm, so maybe I can get back to that. And came across all these CEOs and academics. It was a pretty elite college town. And these women were not trying to look 20. They were not trying to look distorted. They simply wanted to be treated as they always had throughout their life and felt like things were changing as they aged. The changes that happen to women can be masculinizing, and it's not always I feel like on a joke, I say that the women that say that we should do all natural, they look like supermodels already. But at the same time, these women, they just wanted to be treated the same. And I was like, I can sign up for this. I can fight the good fight to help these women feel good about themselves, to empower them, not to take away from them. Right.
Why is it important to you to empower people to believe in themselves?
I've had to do that my whole life, is to lift myself. When things have been dark, when things have been very difficult, I have had to lift myself up. And so it has, from an evolutionary standpoint, become a natural thing to be able to do the same for others and meet them where they are, because that's what we have to do with ourselves in times of trouble and duress. And it's been from a series of overcoming extremely difficult things to learn that you truly can overcome anything. And it's only recently have I understood that these problems and challenges are actually the way through to our goals. They're actually the way through to happiness. And that when we view them as opportunity, when we view them as gifts, which can sound so bitter when you're in the throes of trouble. And at the same time, once you've done the reps, you've had enough trouble in your life, you're like, actually, I can do this. Look at me. Look at everything I've overcome.
Let's talk about what's something that comes up for you when I ask, what's one of maybe the hardest things that you've overcome?
I would say one of the hardest things I've overcome was getting the gumption to be able to break out of the socioeconomic status that my parents had gotten us into. Doing the best that they could. It was very tough growing up. So,
like, what were you seeing as a kid that seemed tough?
Lack of self-worth, that just seemed bottomless. And that was so consuming, it made it hard to see anything or anyone else. And the suffering that came apart for other people as a result of that. And the addiction, it was like, God, what a very difficult way to live, and how miserable, because, as I would imagine for somebody living altered, you're not living, you're just going through the motions,
Yeah. Was there ever a time where you felt that you might fall into that same pattern?
For sure. Well, actually, no. I would say I wasn't ever afraid I was going to fall into the same pattern, but I definitely went through a period of substance abuse where I was just kind of repeating history. I was like, you carry other people's shame that have helped raise you until you learn that it wasn't yours. And of course, then at that point, you might have done your own shameful stuff. Then you got to do the work on that too. But yeah, it's, I thought, wow, this is miserable, and I would never, ever want to live like this. I hate it, So, but at the same time, culturally, there just seemed to be so much pressure where I grew up to fit in that way. You would really stand out if you weren't having a drink, or if you weren't hanging out until 2:00 in the morning or whatever. So it's taken some time to find a place of comfort and safety, and not needing to be that way.
Yeah. So you were the Lone Ranger in stepping out of breaking that pattern?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, even some of my best friends, I get it. I mean, I love to have a cocktail, but I really, it messes with my sleep so much and just my mood, how I function day to day, my sharpness. And I don't want to sacrifice my sharpness. And really, the biggest tipping point for that was having children. And I think it probably is for a lot of people, but it's really just not worth feeling terrible or being moody. It's not fair to them. They didn't do anything, you know?
So are you totally alcohol free at this point?
I'm not completely alcohol free. I mean, I may have a drink 2 or 3 times a year. But yeah, so I guess you could probably call it that.
Yeah, I'm the same very rarely at this point because again, it's not worth it. I'm not
Yeah.
a person that is totally alcohol free forever and ever and ever, but it's pretty rare at this point that I will have a drink.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wish I had different metabolism. Some people tolerate that better than others. I did not get the tolerant gene.
Even though you saw your parents with some form of the tolerant gene or your dad.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, actually my dad said to me once, and it wasn't really welcome, but he was exactly right. He's like, English, unfortunately, I think you're a lot like me. He said normal people, they have a drink and their body tells them when to stop. He said, but you and I, our body says, give me more. That's really more in actually getting out. And it wasn't always like that, but it could be like that. And I couldn't really tell. I was aware that if I hadn't eaten, that was a setup for a disaster. And also if I had been emotional or really having a hard time, but that's obvious. Alcohol is a depressant, that you think it's only when you're using it, but it can be a depressant for days, weeks. Yeah, neurons that fire together wire together. So if you're feeling and thinking low, the more you do that, the more you're going to stay there.
Absolutely. So do you feel that through your business, you're able to be there for women in a way that no one was able to be there for you, that you had to be there for yourself?
Yes, in a way that I've had to show up for myself, in complete raw authenticity, no editing. And that's taken a lot of courage.
Yeah. So how does that feel every day now to know that you are making that kind of an impact?
It feels great. I wake up excited, and that's when I know I'm in my flow. That's when I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be, is I'm ready for the day. I wake up excited, joyful. I really do. I mean, I'm just excited. I go to the gym and life just feels great. And the only times that it doesn't is, we know that when people aren't happy here, it's almost always has nothing to do with us, almost always. And we try to, when we do make mistakes or things aren't optimal, we do our very best to try to make it up to people. And I sleep really good as a result. Feels great.
How would you describe your experience, like someone that walks into your business, what experience or what transformation will they get working with you that's different from walking into a lot of other clinics?
Absolutely. Yes. So when I do a consultation, I do not start from a place of here's my assessment of what you need to look nice.
Let me just tell you what's wrong with your face.
Basically, yes. And I've had a patient come in here and she said, yeah, the last place I went, I left feeling ugly. Because they're like, basically spend $10,000 to look pretty. While it's not to say that if you have a goal to look a certain way, that may not be a piece of it. That's a very overwhelming amount of information on a first time meeting. And so really where I start is with how people feel when they look in the mirror. It's not my opinion of how someone should or shouldn't look. You may have a recessed chin that by a quote unquote standard of beauty might need to be quote corrected. But it might be your mother's chin, your grandmother's chin, and you might really like that chin and you don't want to do anything about it. And as a provider pointing that out, the way that I have cultivated my practice is we meet people where they are. You like it, great. Keep your, whatever it is. And it's, you feel tired. Here are all the options of how we can help improve that. You can start from here and we'll keep working down the list until you have met your own expectations of what you would like. And I keep a long Rolodex of before and afters of what we think looks nice. None of them are edited. They're all normal people who have been so kind to allow us to use those photos And these are outcomes that were achieved on their budget. So I think that that's the most realistic testimony of what people can expect when they come in here is to do these pictures align with my goal, number one, but also I want a provider that I may or may not leave feeling good about myself.
Well, like you say, most women are trained to know all the things about them that are wrong.
That's exactly right. And so, from a beauty perspective, do we know how to optimize? 100%. And if that's something that you're into, let's talk about it. And at the same time, I have women that come in all the time. One of my favorite examples is like they don't like their frown lines. They don't want to look angry and they want Botox there, but they really like their smile lines because they say it's the reflection of a life well lived and more power to them. Not all women even feel confident enough to articulate that. They might let us assess it and think, well, they think I need it, I better do it. But then they may leave resentful because they spent the money and that's not what they really wanted to start with. Really getting down to the bottom of what is it really that you want out of this experience together.
So what I'm hearing is that you ask far more questions than the typical injectable provider.
Yeah. I mean, we book a lot more time than the typical med spa, a lot more time. A lot of models would probably look at hours and think that it's not sustainable, but our patients are happy. Providers are happy. It's not a rushed environment. No one feels like a number. And we regularly hear, no one's ever taken the time to explain that to me. And I didn't leave here feeling ugly.
A 7-figure business in the first year says it's absolutely sustainable. What is the impact that you're providing for the women that are walking out of your office, not just for when they look in the mirror, but how they're showing up in the world?
Oh, I love that. So my favorite thing to show is that when you do look at our before and afters, you can just see in their gaze that they feel more confident, that they feel better about themselves. It's the coolest thing ever. And I have witnessed my patients cry seeing their before and afters. I have had women grab me in shock because they are so blown away when they see their before and after. I mean, because it's one thing, you see yourself in the mirror all day long and you forget what your baseline is. So it's really, really important for all of our patients as a culture for patients to be able to see what they've invested in so that they get that feedback, that they are actually getting what they came for.
For the woman that's listening that wants to provide something like this, we chatted a little bit off camera that you need a 4-year education in most states to be able to start something like this. But let's say the listener does have that. What advice would you give to her to take that courage to step out of what's comfortable working for someone else to building something of your own?
Yeah, I would say, well, to start, I think what set me up for success was working with other successful women. I think you set yourself up for success when you work or model other people that are way ahead of you. And I had my first full-time aesthetics job. I was really fortunate to work with a group of very professional middle-aged women who were excellent with patients and excellent communication skills and excellent with safety. Nobody wants to borrow trouble. Nobody was a cowgirl. And so
I'm a cowgirl.
I know. Well, and they're awesome and bless them because we need them to help drive us forward sometimes, but that's just not been my MO. And using that model to help set you up for success when you are ready. And as far as the keys, the secret sauce, one of the most important things is seeing people for follow-up. If you're not seeing follow-ups for every single thing you do, not only is the patient not getting the feedback of their investment, but if you aren't delivering, you aren't getting the feedback. So that's a really, really important step in this space to set yourself up for success.
I think that's applicable to any businesses out there. If you're not following up, to be sure that whatever you're telling your customers you're here to provide, that how do you know that you're not hitting the mark if you're not following up to see where you're landing?
That's exactly right. In every sense of the word. I mean, and it's not, and in this space, it's not always just about the result. Sometimes it's knowing that you cared enough to call after a procedure to have that done. And while that takes much more resource to be able to offer, it's a worthy cause. It's a worthy add-on to be able to do that for patients.
Speaking to your own experience of the difference between someone coming in and you telling them this is what's wrong with your face versus tell me what you're not liking when you look in the mirror, it's the same with the results. If you believe that you're the one that determines that you hit the nail on the head with the results versus asking them, are you happy now when you look in the mirror? Are you feeling what you wanted to feel when you walked in telling me what you were not feeling?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there is something called, I call it the funhouse mirror, where when we look at our own reflection, to be a good aesthetic provider, we need to be able to gauge whether or not we can even meet that person's needs. And there will be small flags, if they've been to a lot of other providers or in a business, if they've gone through several other businesses in a short form, then that's usually a flag that we might not be able to meet their expectations. And I'm very clear about that, by the way, is I'm not afraid to say, look, I'm not positive. I think we can make progress. Whether or not that meets your expectations, I don't know. There's no guarantees. And we can work together. Or if that feels like too much of a risk to you, then we don't have to, you know? But so much of it is a matter of perception. So that's why those pictures are so, so, so important. From an aesthetic provider standpoint, you have to be a good before and after photographer to be able to illustrate that, because otherwise you can make a before look worse, actually. You can make the after look worse. You can make the result look worse, depending on the tilt of the head, the lighting, and all that. Which is buyer beware, looking at other provider before and afters as well. That's why you want to see a lot of them.
And how did you learn all of this?
Oh gosh, isn't that so interesting? There's no standard education for aesthetic providers, and a lot of people I don't think know that. There's all kinds of things popping up now that offer certification, but the certification as far as competency really means nothing. All it means is that you attended a specific training program, and frankly, it takes years to really be able to hone this craft and be very good. In fact, the statistic is that our incidence of adverse events drops by 70% at 5 years. So 5 years seems to be the magic mark for improved mastery. But even then, even after doing this for 10 years, I continue to learn. And that's part of the great thing about medicine is if you like to learn, this is a great place to be.
I think it's so interesting that you never saw yourself going down this path and helping people with something that was superficial, but you've learned it's so much more than just superficial if you allow it to be that kind of a space.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I know. It's so funny. I mean, my poor mother, she would dye her hair lots of different colors for whatever she felt like. And actually that is where I get a lot of this is she was so brave. She did not care. She was her own person. And I say she did not care in some ways because how she wanted to be, however she wanted to be. And that's admirable. I mean, there's lots of other people in the world out there like that. I mean, I used to always joke, whether you like Madonna or not, that woman has been her own person from the very beginning, and look at all that she's accomplished, whether you think she's great or not, It's interesting that I've been able to digest my experience with her and marry that with the experience of these CEOs and academic women that just wanted to feel better and be able to come up with that formula of a natural look. I kind of joke, I pat myself on the back. I was doing quote unquote natural looks long before it was cool and trendy. I mean, that's the only thing I've ever done. I think I'm able to do that because I find the sense of purpose and empowering, not in the projecting my values onto someone else. I mean, and I personally just don't think from a business model, I couldn't live with it, but I think that I'm able to build a better, more consistent and reliable practice by doing things this way than simply giving people what they want.
Did you see your mom, even though you saw her in some ways living out her authentic self, but did you also see her being influenced to do things that you felt were superficial that weren't a reflection of who she really was?
Well, yeah. I mean, and as my mother, I wanted her to feel good about herself. She was gorgeous, beautiful. I mean, she's a beautiful woman. And what I saw was providers that were willing to exploit what she didn't feel good about. And instead of helping her, leaving her feeling better, it was like an unfillable pit. And because no matter what they did, none of that would ever meet what needed to be fixed in on our heart, on her heart, of having that sense of self-worth. And that's the empowerment piece, is that if somebody doesn't need something, that's saying, look, if you want to look like a caricature, there are providers that do that. And I don't say it in these words, but there are providers that are happy to give you a very unnatural result. But that's not what I do. And that's not what we deliver. That's not our aesthetic.
What has been the best business advice that you've received?
The best business advice that I received is focus on the solution. What is the solution that you offer to your patients, to your clients? What is the problem that you're fixing for them? Do that in all of your messaging. And to me, that has been the best advice that I've gotten, outside of the nonverbal advice of just treating people really, really well.
It's interesting. How did you come up with the version of your business that you felt good about that wasn't what you had always seen?
Well, I don't know that I really came up with it. It was just how I'd always done things. And so it was just iterations of how I had always practiced. And like I said, it started with those women that worked in academia and the CEOs that I was like, I got it. Because I was like, these are intelligent women. They are confident already, but they just want the outside to mirror the inside. So that's really where the iterations started. Yeah.
What is one thing about you that you wish more people knew better about you?
I had a patient say once she was shocked that I had experienced any struggle. And I would just say that I think the ups and downs of my life would be shocking to most of my patients, that, some of it's the stuff of Lifetime movies, and that I think based on what I have learned and accomplished, anybody can accomplish anything that they want, that they truly want. You got to really
tell me a little bit about what you're talking about?
Sure. I mean, I have had to overcome just basically being very poor growing up in an affluent area. I didn't have any money to go to college. I had to take a risk on myself to borrow all the money, which back then was a ton of money. It's not that much anymore, but it was a lot then. And, even opening up a business, it comes to a point in your life where you have to bet on yourself. That's what it all boils down to, and it's not that no one else is going to be there for you. No one else should be there for you. This is about you and your life, and we have to create it.
Mm-hmm. What is one struggle that most people have never heard you actually walked through?
I really got to a point in my life where my brother was very ill, and both of my parents were tied up in their own problems, and my friends, my life was so heavy and dark. It was as if, the friends that I had, and they were good friends, but nobody really knows what to say because no one can relate. It was very out there. I got to a point, I was just so lonely. I didn't want to live anymore. I really didn't, because I thought, well, if this is what life is really about and I don't have connection to anyone, then what's the point? And I had to make a decision. I'm, going back to the substance abuse, and, it wasn't an overnight switch, but I had to decide, do I want to keep just going through the motions, or do I really want to live? And it began with something as simple as a bath bomb. I'm going to lay here and enjoy this and really smell the scent and be in the moment, because when I think you've been as hard on yourself as you tend to be growing up in that environment, not getting it right can feel pathetic, for lack of better words. That's how it feels on the inside, or it did to me. Because because you don't see all the accomplishments. You're just where you are because you keep going. Understanding that this whole life is a process. It's a process, and that looking back, all of these huge hurdles have really helped shape who I am as a person. They've helped shape who I am as a professional. And they have all created me to be the person that I am. And I like me most days. And it can get to that point if you can just hang in there and find support. I had therapy. I went to Al-Anon. I have had a lot of very special people. I had an aunt and a grandfather that were huge supporters of mine, and special friends that have just been guides. Not all of them have been here for the lifetime, but they've been here for the season or the reason, if you've heard that before. But I'm so thankful that they showed up when they did. And all of that experience has shown me that I really can do anything. It's just a matter of self-trust. And I think that's been the thing, is learning to trust yourself and understanding that connection is really where this life is at.
So you felt like you didn't have connection with your parents or your brother through that season?
No. Well, and of course, I mean, both of my parents were in the throes of their addiction, so it wasn't really them. It was a version of them, but it wasn't them. And my brother, I had to commit him, and that was an extremely lonely time. He was in a terrible place, but I was also scared that if I didn't do that, something worse would happen to him. And I was just desperate for him to get help to have a life at all. Yeah, we were about 2.5 years apart, and it was just so it's so hard to watch people that you love suffer. And
how old was he, and how old were you at this time in your life?
We were late 20s.
Oh, wow. Did you feel that you were responsible for him because you had your life more together than your parents had their lives together?
Well, sure. If I didn't do it, I was pretty sure nobody would.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that. I don't think that they had a bandwidth to even know who to ask or call. And, when you're dealing with your own addiction, I think it's a way of kind of trying to self-preserve. Then they might have to look at themselves too. And neither one of them were ready to do that at that point. So yeah, and my baby brother he had a brand new family and lived 2 hours away. And and it was just me in the same town with him. So
you were the one that was willing to look at your own patterns and see, okay, if I'm really going to help him make a difference, I've got to be the leader to make those choices and changes to show him what's possible.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And, but that's tough, because in the situation that he was in, he's not even able to receive it. I mean, my life has felt like a series of trying to help people that can't be helped.
Mm-hmm.
And, some people are ready, but not everybody is. And that gift has been learning to meet people where they are and to love them anyway.
Yeah. What does love mean to you now?
Yeah. Love to me, boy, that's a big question. We all want unconditional love. And I think that that's really learning to love someone, is loving them at their best and their worst, but not necessarily having to be what's the right word? It doesn't mean that we have to enable bad habits. It doesn't mean that we have to carry their burden. We can love them. And I love the example in Al-Anon of, if an alcoholic came home and passed out on the floor, what would you do? And a lot of people, people in relationships with addicts that hadn't done a lot of work might try to wake them up or put them in the bed, and the idea was, well, you just cover them up with a blanket and let them lay there, which is really hard for a lot of people to do. It may sound simple, but it's just this idea of letting go, letting them do whatever it is they need to do.
Not stepping in and trying to be the rescuer.
That's right. Trying to be the lighthouse, not the tugboat, not the repairman.
Mm-hmm. And I can imagine you've created so much success in your life, and you're living life as a 10x version of yourself that a lot of people would think you've probably never had experiences like those. And so interesting. I wonder, as people hear more about your story, how surprised they might be.
Yeah, and actually I just read 10x is easier than 2x, and that's really where I am in my own process and trying to let go even more of, most of these things I have not wanted to talk about because they're very dark. And like I said, there was a one point in my life where I felt very lonely, and abandoned is probably an accurate word, but not abandoned in a negative way. People just didn't know what to say or what to do, But understanding now that because of my experiences that I may be able to help more and more people that may be going through the same things or having the same doubts that I might have had at one point. That to me is I went to a leadership retreat in the fall with my business coach, Kaylee Lindholm, and I came to the revelation that I'm intimidated by myself. I'm intimidated by my own power. And that has really stirred the pot. And then going through this process of learning more and more about ourselves and potential and putting ourselves out there and letting go of fear has been amazing. It's been life changing.
Yeah. So what's your next big vision goal that you have now that you kind of have all this awareness and you've accomplished so much in the last 3 years?
Yeah. Well, the next is there's several forks, and I'm still working on this in my mind's eye. Is leveling up aesthetics as a whole. So teaching more injectors how to empower, and then also reaching out to more providers to help build connection, patient retention, and relationships to help their business. And then from there, even to expand with women in general. I mean, it's such a big, lofty goal to me, and it's not clear at all. But I know that there's going to be so much power behind coming together and lifting each other. It's electric, and I'm ready for it.
What a beautiful mission that I have no doubts that you will create, you'll bring to life. Where can people find you?
Yes. So follow me at the English Aesthetic on Instagram. And if you DM me the word growth, I'll be happy to send you my Google sheet on Behind the Glow, how to build a 7-figure business without losing yourself. And if you're just interested and more feeling better about yourself, DM me the word glow, and I'll send you my guide on the top 3 treatments to look refreshed and not done.
Oh my gosh, I need those. All of the above, please. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun chatting with you today. Thank you for sharing what you've shared and sharing your heart and being brave enough to actually share some of the things that are from the darkest moments in our lives, because that is where real transformation is connected.
Agreed. Thanks for having me, Kindra. I really appreciate your time and letting me share.
What if your hardest chapters were never meant to break you, but to build the version of you that the world needs most? English's journey is a beautiful reminder that we don't have to settle for systems or environments that don't align with our values, and that it is possible to create a thriving business rooted in empathy, connection, and purpose. If this episode stirred something in you, share it with a friend who's walked through something hard. And if you're ready to step into your own version of purpose-driven success, take a brave next step today. You were never meant to stay small. Until next time, let no one clip your wings.